Okay, now that it is 6:30, we can officially, 7:30, call the meeting to order. Please rise for the pledge.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, everyone. We will start with 1.0, the presentations. 1.1, the Alan Slovity, who is going to be giving out this award, is unable to be here. He's home ill. So we will schedule that for another evening, and we'll move on to item 1.2, Maple Street School, Community School presentation.
Thank you. Coming to the table is Ms. Melissa Trantolo, who is the principal of Maple Street School. She's going to share a little bit about the community school, which you know started 3 years ago. And in that time, we have searched for a community partner to help us with the school. It really should be run by the community as opposed to the school itself. And so she's going to share a little bit about the advantages of having a community partner with you, and I'll turn it over to her.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having me tonight. 2 weeks ago, I presented about Maple Street School, our vision for improvement, and today I would like to talk about our vision for improvement and enrichment for our community school. Currently, this year, during the 2014 school year, 2014-2015 school year, we have approximately 40 students who stay after school Monday through Thursday. We have one full-time position that runs community school, which is our family associate. All other, besides our one paid position, all other people who work for our community school are volunteer-based providers and aides. These volunteers come from the community. They also come from Rockville High School. We have some student volunteers that help out with our homework with our students. Some of the courses that we were able to offer this year were hip hop, yoga, Lego club, art club, Vernon Reads, 4-H, basketball, softball, reading to the dogs, and homework help. One other element that we got for our community school this year is dinner is provided for our students who attend. Based off of our community school model, I looked for feedback as to how we could improve our community school. One thing that I heard over and over again is more consistent staff and programs and more resources needed. What happens many times, since we are volunteer-based, is if a volunteer has to back out for some reason, they'll call us the day of, and the program gets canceled that day. Also, since we only have one paid position, if that person happens to be sick that day, we have to cancel community school for the day. So it kind of puts parents in a little bit of a hardship because they're getting last-minute notice that a certain program might be canceled or the whole community school might have to be canceled. If a program does get canceled, we will keep the kids and they'll get additional homework help, but again, it's not their child's first choice. This year, based on our numbers, we actually had to turn more people away than we had available. So we had a higher interest than spots available, which is a good thing. We had a very high interest, but we would like to be able to offer spots to anybody who is interested. Another thing I heard many times is we want more academic enrichment offerings. We would really like to make the community school be more aligned to the curriculum that our students are receiving throughout the day. We think by having that alignment, it's also going to improve our student achievement. So over the past couple years, can you guys hear me okay with this? It's hard to tell. Okay, thanks. Over the past couple years, we've been exploring partnerships with lead agencies throughout the community. Some of the reasons we've been doing that is if we do have a lead partner, we'll be able to increase our participation. We would be able to hire more staff, and by hiring more staff, we'll be able to have more students participate. By having more staff, we can also expand our services and our academic enrichment programs that align with the curriculum. By having more staff, we could give them more customized, tailored training. So one example that we've been kind of brainstorming is math Olympiads or coding for computers. We could actually train those staff members that would come from the lead agency to be able to implement those programs. So they would be running some programs, but then we would still have the community volunteers, for example, 4-H, karate, coming in, so we'd be able to offer a lot more programs to the students. By having a lead agency, this would also increase our opportunity for grants. A lot of times grants, people who are giving grants really look for a collaboration between the community and school. So this would help increase our opportunities to receive grant money. So this is where we're hoping to take our community school by getting a lead agency. Again, we can just expand participation. We can have more trained members working on our staff, and that way it would lead to an increase in our student achievement. Are there any questions?
Do you have any organizations that are interested in being partners with you?
We do, the YMCA.
The volunteers, do they have to volunteer all 4 days, or do they switch on and off?
They can switch on and off, so it kind of just depends on their availability. So we kind of run our programs based on when they are available. So for example, we had a dance teacher who was coming 1 day a week, so we would offer dance class on that day. So it just depends on their availability.
Okay.
We try to work around their schedules.
And volunteers, do they always have to come with their abilities, or can they volunteer just to help the children out? Like homework, or like?
Yeah, we do have a homework component, so many of the high school volunteers help out with that.
Okay.
Yep. We have Vernon Reed, so we have some people who come in who read one-on-one with the children. We have reading with the dogs, so the kids get to read too. There's a certain golden retriever and a beagle that come in, and kids get to read the dogs.
Do you have a backup list?
Of volunteers?
Yes.
We really don't. Each cycle, we're really working the community trying to get people in. So with having a lead agency and having those staff members, we would still welcome the volunteers, but we could have solid programming throughout the school year just by the members that we have hired.
Thank you.
Could you explain what a lead agency would do for, like what exactly they would do? Do they provide money? I know they provide people who work, but what else would they?
They provide people who work, they provide training for those people. They help with the program. We're talking with the YMCA. We've really talked about having that collaboration and that alignment. So there would be a person that would be the point person that would be the liaison between the lead agency and the school, so that way we could have the alignment between the curriculum. Also being able to receive teacher feedback, so areas like that.
And they cover the cost for all of that? For the people that they bring in? Or is there a cost? Are they all volunteers also?
They would be paid people, yeah. They would be
But
paid
but
through the Y.
agency would be
The
paid.
agency would be paying them, yeah.
Thank you. Anyone? Dr. Paul?
If I may, Mrs. Fisher, thank you. To follow up on the last question, right now we do have one employee for that program. I'm going to say we've got budgeted $35,000 or something like that in our budget for the one person. We've had two different people over the last 3 years, but as I said, as Ms. Trantolo just said, one person finds it very difficult to supervise more than 40 children at a time. Not that they're doing 40 at one time, but they're all of those programs that are going on that Ms. Trantolo mentioned it. So we have been trying for a long time to connect with Big Brothers Big Sisters, the YMCA, anyone who might have an interest in being a partner with the Vernon Public Schools and with the community school at Maple Street School. So we do have a lot of interest from the YMCA. We did a few years ago and it fell through, but things are looking pretty good right now. What we would be doing and what I would be bringing forward on your meeting on June 8th, what we would be doing is using the funding that we have budgeted to pay the Y for this program, and they would supply all the staff and the programs and the consistency. So if they had an absent staff member, another one would step in. So what I'm going to be asking on June 8th, because it is approximately $30,000, we'll get you all the details prior to that, is a waiver of the bid to use that, because that's over our bidding process. So we have been searching continuously for a partner. So even if we put out a request for proposal, I don't know that we're going to get anyone to respond. So, so anyway, that's what we're going to be asking next time. Ms. Trantolo has shared the positives about having a community partner, especially the grant piece at the end, which is marvelous for us. So, and that consistency and being able to have students every single day and probably double the number of students that we have right now in the program. So that's, this is the prelude to June 8th and asking you to waive the bid process so that we could go forward with this.
Anybody have any questions for Dr. Conley? Mrs. Blaine?
Would that level of participation from the Y, would it become a Y program, or would it still remain a community school?
I would ask Ms. Trantola or Mr. Picaro, who's on the board at the Y, to respond to that. They've been involved in the negotiations or the conversations.
Through you, Madam Chair. It's our program. They provide services. We've been meeting with them for the past several months to try to piece together a program that we could bring before you that would meet our operational needs. In fact, it actually goes well beyond meeting our operational needs. It's a force multiplier. For the same investment within our budget for next year, we literally will be getting 6 times the staff and multiple other opportunities to grow the program. The one point that I would highlight is the curriculum piece that Mrs. Trantola had talked about, and that is going to be a huge component, and it has been a huge component in our conversations with the YMCA to date, is they will carry forward what curriculum activities are happening during the day for those students that participate in the program after school, and they'll be able to do it in a way that we can't do it with one staff person right now. So it really is a force multiplier, and it really is something that will enhance our existing programs to a degree that we just can't do with the current staff and resources that we have now. And that will all occur within the same budget constraints that we're working in right now.
What do you see the staff additions, how much of a staff addition are we talking about?
Up to 6 additional staff for the same cost that we're spending on one staff person now.
If something sounds too good to be true. What's in it for the Y?
Through you, Madam Chair. This is what they do. These are programs that's part of their mission, the core mission, to work with communities, organizations, work with schools. In fact, that's one of the primary goals for the YMCA. Always has been. It's always been a priority. So this is what they do. These are programs and services that they offer. Of course, you know, this isn't for free, and they are charging us for it. But when we did the cost-benefit analysis of what we're getting with one staff person now, and it's not that this is not a commentary on that individual staff person or their performance in any way, shape, or form, but the facts are the program and services that we get with the Y are much greater than what we're getting with the one staff person that we're affording now.
Is there a downside?
Well, at this point, we're looking at the total cost, and we're looking at the insurance, and we're looking at the liability issues, and so there's contracts to negotiate. So I think we've, as Dr. Conway has stated, we've taken it to a point where we want to move forward with it, but we need the board's permission to do so following our business and finance procurement rules. So we'll be bringing that forward through the finance committee and then to the regular board to discuss that in more detail.
Liability was actually exactly what I was thinking about, so you'll have all of those answers in June.
Yes.
Okay.
Through Madam Chair, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody have any other questions? Thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation. And we'll move on to item 1.3, the Gifted and Talented Program presentation. Mrs. Lee.
Thank you. I'd like to introduce Mrs. Regina Lee. She is our gifted, talented teacher, and she's based in the middle school. That's where we decided 4 years ago to start her, I think, at halftime at that point. And then the board was so pleased with the work that had been accomplished that they made that position full-time. So she's just going to give an overview of what's going on in terms of gifted and talented.
Good evening. It's a perfect evening to be here because we just saw many of our gifted and talented students for an hour before this meeting. So I'll give you a little bit of background information, which most of you already know, but I'll just reiterate it. About 5 to 7% of the general population is gifted and talented. And normally when we say gifted and talented, or when we say gifted, we talk about individuals with IQs of 130 or greater. if we've actually done the testing, the IQ testing to get that number. We use in Vernon, if we have IQ data, we use that. But if we don't, we use the information and the resources from the University of Connecticut, from their Center for Talent Development, Joe Renzulli and Sally Rees, who are premier researchers in giftedness. And their triad of identification talks about high ability, there's your intelligence, but also creativity, students with creativity in the arts and performing, in music, and also task commitment and motivation. So in Vernon, when we identify, we don't just look at intelligence, we also look at their motivation and their commitment to their task. If at some point I say something that sounds confusing, please feel free to stop me. I'm happy to stop anytime. So currently we have 70 students identified at Rockville High School, 30 identified at the middle school, and 9 identified at the elementary school. And we're in the process right now of identifying 7 more. In fact, the paperwork is on my desk right now. We will probably have that PPT right first week of June. I think June 8th is when we have it set. We use different ways of identifying students, but they all fall into several steps. The first step is the student should be recommended by either a teacher or another staff person or a parent. We always start with a recommendation. And then we look at their academic achievement. We look at their grades, we look at standard scores, we look at all of that data that we have about how they're performing in school. Then we look at their task commitment. Are they motivated students? Do they go above and beyond? Are they interested learners? Do they have a thirst for knowledge? Are they asking questions? And then we also look at their creativity in the arts. All of these criteria get reviewed continuously, because year after year, sometimes we change our standardized testing methods. So we moved from CMTs to SBAC, so we'll have to review our criteria using SBAC data. We use the NWEA MAP testing right now, so we will also have to look at that. They do have criteria for giftedness with that MAP testing. They have a range of 95th percentile or higher. So as we add different things in Vernon for testing students, we will review our criteria and hopefully add those things in there as well. Although we are mandated and we do want to identify students as gifted and or talented, one of the things that I have stressed in the last 4 years that I've been here is that enrichment in this town should be available for every student who wants it, whether you are identified or not. If you have a thirst to learn something, whether your IQ is 130 or not, you should be able to learn it. You should have somebody support you in that learning. So I work very hard to bring enrichment to any student that asks for it or any parent that asks for it. And I feel very strongly about that. I know that there are many districts that have a lot more resources than we do and a lot more different ways of testing students. And I know that in some of their programming, the students have to be identified in order to participate. And I just feel that we do it better, because if you want it, you should be able to learn it. So that's my own personal, theory about gifted education. We do have resources available to parents and to teachers. We have a Gifted and Talented page, which I change periodically, and then we also have an educational links page on our website, on our district website. And parents can always go in there and look up resources if they would like to do things with their students at home or even over the summer, when sometimes learning slows down a little bit. I always hate that. So I'm hoping that these students are going on there and pulling some resources that they can use. And parents do contact me on a regular basis and say things like, what should we be doing over the summer? Is there anything they can be doing? And I usually will point them in several directions depending on what the student has a deep interest in. It is the summer, so you do want to tap into what they're interested in and keep them engaged that way. I'm going to sort of now talk about the 3 layers of education in Vernon, the high school, the middle school, and then the elementary level. We're very blessed that at the high school we have College Career Pathways program, we have ECE, and we have AP classes, because our gifted students thrive in those situations, and they would like to get a jump start on their college education, a lot of them. and I see that students are really making use of this. In the college career pathways, we have agricultural ed, we have allied health, business and office technology, early childhood education, communications and technology education, and the students are thrilled that they can start actually working with other college students and get some college credit for these. We have an ECE and AP program. We have courses availability, 15 courses available through UConn's Early College Experience program, and then 10 subjects offered for students where they can either take the class, or if the class is not available, they can actually test. They can take the class and test, or just test. I know from personal experience, from knowing a lot of our graduating students over the years, that some of these students are going into college with one semester already completed, sometimes more, which saves them time and money in the end, and is a wonderful opportunity, and I'm so pleased that the high school has been able to keep this available for our students. I just want more and more, more and more, always for them. At VCMS, we have been able to do some new things this year and also continue some wonderful things that we're already doing. We have accelerated math in 7th grade, and we offer algebra in 8th grade. The reason that this slide also says accelerated math 6th grade is because starting next year, we will also offer it in 6th grade. I felt that we had a little gap there. We have students coming from 5th grade that are already accelerated in math. I'm thrilled that we're going to be able to offer them sort of that path as they start the middle school. And then obviously we have algebra in 8th grade. We have opportunities also in the arts for our advanced students. We have Epic Art. Students can apply for that at the end of 6th grade, and then they can be in that advanced art program in 7th and 8th grade. And if you haven't had a chance to come to the middle school lately, I encourage you to come and see the amazing artwork that is around that building that some of these Epic Art students are creating. Right now we have a beautiful mural that's being, it's almost finished, it's right outside of our cafeteria. The students are going to be making a graffiti wall in our courtyard. Just amazing, amazing things out of the Epic Art students, and all of it has some sort of a social and community piece attached to it, which is a lovely, a lovely feeling about Epic Art. In band and chorus, and in our UA classes, the teachers automatically differentiate for our higher students. Students who are quicker, either in tech ed or in sewing, they have extra projects that they work on, and many of them do. In band and chorus, our students can have opportunities to participate in the Eastern Regional Program, and also I know that both our band and chorus teachers offer advanced learning for those students that are just thirsting to do more. Our teachers differentiate on a regular basis. Some of our teachers compact the curriculum, which means they pre-test the students, and the subjects that the students have shown mastery in, they either eliminate those things and give replacement work for the students. We also recently have started to do more and more with cross-curricular units. So our language arts teachers, for example, were reading a book called Out of My Mind, which is about a student that has cerebral palsy and can't speak and can't walk. At the same time, those language arts teachers connected with our science teachers who were researching genetic diseases. And then all of those students together were able to have some presenters come in and actually talk firsthand about what it means to have a learning disability, or about what it means to have been born with some sort of a genetic disability. So the same thing in 8th grade. Our social studies teachers and our language arts teachers have combined their curriculum to put lessons together that the students can bring from core class to core class. So when they leave their language arts class, they're not done. They're going to expand their learning in their social studies class, and it's wonderful to watch, and the kids are engaged and they like it. They don't feel like everything is compartmentalized. They feel like their learning is integrated. So that's really wonderful. The other thing that we've added at the middle school over the last 2 or 3 years is we've started to use some online learning through GradPoint. GradPoint is traditionally something that we use here at the high school, but we have advanced students at the middle school that can benefit from that. So we do have a few that go on GradPoint and they're taking advanced classes there. Some of them just for enrichment on their own time, and some of them to combine with their regular core classes. It's not a large number. It's something that I feel is sort of still in a let's wait and see how this really works phase. But I love having this idea that we're doing something that's preparing the kids for what's going to happen to them at the high school level. So grad point, a good thing. Just in the last month, we have had some amazing things happen at the middle school level, and I want to talk to you about them because they're some of the jewels of Vernon Public Schools. The Bermuda Workshop students just got back on Friday night. They were in Bermuda for a week, and they were real scientists, you know, living and working at the BIOS Center, along with college students. These students were selected in the fall, and they spent months and months preparing for this very intense, very academically rigorous trip. And they loved it. And they were challenged, and they loved it. They could have been there 2 weeks. You know, they really learned so much. So here's our group from this year. They went spelunking, they went snorkeling, they went to the aquarium and looked at some of the different animals there. They went to the zoo. They came back with data about weather, about replanting trees, about saving the birds that are becoming extinct. So much information and such small little bodies, and I think they're going to remember this forever and ever. I added the link there to their blog because the blog is worth reading. It's really worth reading. It's a great information about what these students learn. Once again, not all of these students are identified gifted students, but all of these students have a thirst for learning. They all want it. They all work very, very hard. History Day. When I came to you and made this presentation in front of you 3 years ago, I told you that we were going to finally put Vernon on the map. We were one of the only towns in Connecticut that didn't have any students participating in Connecticut History Day. So Cindy McManaman and I, she's 7th grade social studies at the middle school, we went to several workshops. We got together with the Old State House, and last year we had 9 students join our History Day Club. And out of those 9 students, we had 1 actually compete. They slowly dropped out because it is a lot of work. So we had 1 compete. She went to the regional competition and had a wonderful time, did not advance, but had a wonderful time. So that was 1 student, last year. This year we had 200. We joined with 8th grade social studies, and every 8th grader was required to complete a History Day project at the beginning level. From those 200, we selected about 45 projects at an in-school competition, and from those 45 projects, about 22 actually went to the regional competition. All 45 could have gone, but some of the students decided, this is a lot of work for me. You know, you really have to be committed. That's why task commitment is important. They have to do a lot of work on the weekends, after school, on their own time. So 22 went to the regional competition, and in 5 individual categories, 3 of those were won first place by VCMS students. So we had 3 VCMS students win first place medals at the regional competition at Manchester High School, which was amazing. It was just amazing. I couldn't believe it. Well, I believe it of them, but I just couldn't believe that we grew our program so quickly. All because we said to the kids, come on, you can do it. You know, do it. We're going to make you do it. This part is mandatory, and then you're going to love it so much you're going to want to keep going. Those 3 students, Joan Jacobs, Amy Lee, and Abby Tyrell, went on to the state competition. They did not go on to the national competition. Amy won a special award for her presentation on medical history, which was wonderful. And I've already heard from at least 2 of these students that they can't wait to do it at the high school level next year. So next year, our goal is to get some of the high school students involved. You know, this is not just a middle school thing. Students can compete anywhere up until 12th grade. So we're very excited. That's it was just dear to my heart. Other things at the middle school level, we do have lots of poetry and essay contests. One of our students just won $500 in the Chet essay contest, Tommy Rhodes. We have lots of academic Bs, the geography B, the spelling bee, the Pi Day math bee, and the science bee. The science bee is brand new this year. Students have said to me, Mrs. Lee, it's not fair. You have geography and spelling and math. Where's the science for the kids who love science? So I said, fine, we'll have a science bee. June 4th, you're all invited to come. Another thing that we did differently this year with 6th grade math Olympiads. 6th grade math Olympiads was traditionally an after-school club, and I was able to get, maybe, 8 to 12 students to come after school. I asked Mr. Harrison this year if I could do it a little differently. Can I do it within the school day? While the teacher in the classroom is working with the students who might need a little bit more help, can I take the students who are really advanced and do math Olympiads with them? And he said, okay, you can try it. And we did, and we got 29 students to participate. And it was great. It was just math all the time. It was wonderful. So math Olympiads grew a lot this year. We also have 7th and 8th grade math counts, which is another math team. That one does meet after school, and they have about 15 students, and they've been very successful. And other things that we've added this year for our enrichment, we've had 2 events with UConn. They have come in the evening, and they've had a science night and a math night, which has been exciting. They come and they run workshops with us. It's been a lot of fun. And then we bring students to UConn twice a year. We bring a group of girls in the fall and a group of boys in the spring for something called Multiply Your Options, which is all about STEM and engineering. The students spend all day in workshops. Good stuff. At the elementary level, support and resources are available to teachers whenever they request them. And sometimes teachers will say, I have a 4th grader or a 5th grader or even a 3rd grader or even a kindergartner. They're ahead of everyone else. What can you give me? And I have lots of resources in my room, and I bring them over, and we sit and we meet, and we talk about maybe some individual projects, varied levels of reading. I have lots of challenge math books, all of those kinds of things. And all of that is available anytime they need it. How do we continue to challenge? Better identification procedures. Right now, we don't have 5 to 7% of our students identified. I'd like to bring that up because I know that there are students that could be identified that have not been yet. We sort of are in a transition between our standardized testing over the last year and a half. So I think that once we're firmly grounded in the SBAC scores and all of those other things, I think it'll make it easier. I would love to bring whole school events to the schools on a regular basis. Enrichment events on, every month or every other month to the schools. So I'm trying to figure out how to do that. We've started partnerships with RHS. RHS will come to us and do some presentations. They came and presented the play Seat Folks this year, which was great because all of our 7th graders and this year's 8th graders read Seat Folks as part of their language arts last year and this year. So that was a great joining with the high school. More support for the teachers. I'm always trying to find things that will help them. More accessibility for the students. We have a late bus now, which is wonderful because I'd like to be able to have students stay after school for different enrichment activities. I'd like to have a chess club and a Scrabble club. And sometimes what you find is that if the students don't have a ride home, then they can't stay. So I'm thrilled that we have a late bus. An enrichment summer program. I have participated in that over the last 2 years, and we are offering more and more enrichment over the summer during our summer school program. And then lots of field trips connected to challenging curriculum. For 3 years, I've been trying to get our students to go to something called CAMPY on campus. CAMPY stands for the Connecticut Association of Mathematically Precocious Youth. We had, long title. Our budget was frozen for a couple of years, so it was hard to plan that. But this year, we finally took 47 middle school students to CAMPY on campus. And we were the school with the most students there, and they loved it. They were just immersed in math and STEM workshops all day long, and it was great to see. The bus was happy and jolly, and the kids came home saying, when are we going to do it? Are we going to do it again next year? Can we do it when we're at the high school? Well, I think it's just for middle school, but we'll figure something else out for the high school. So always trying to make the program grow, always trying to get the most that I can for my buck, always trying to get the most students to do the things that we offer them. Sometimes the students come in 6th grade, and we've identified them in 4th or 5th grade, and they don't really want to take advantage of some of the opportunities. But I feel like if I get to them slowly, by the time they're 7th and 8th graders, they're here. They're here getting awards, you know, on these kinds of evenings. So I love to see them grow, and I just want the most that I can get for them. So, any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions?
I have a comment.
Mrs. Russell?
Thank you. I commend you for being so excited. I commend you for encouraging the kids, and just keep up the good work.
Thank you so
You're
much.
welcome.
Can I tell you one more thing? You just refreshed my memory. We have an Envirothon group here at the high school, and I'm going to use this as an opportunity to brag a little bit. So our Envirothon group has 5 students, 5 girls, it's sophomore and freshman girls, and they competed last Thursday. Mr. Doe and Mrs. Martin are the 2 teachers that work with them. So Mr. Doe, Mrs. Martin, and I took them to the Envirothon competition on Thursday. They scored number 13 out of 38 teams, and they beat out South Windsor, Ellington, and East Catholic High School. So, you know, with all due respect to all of our lovely neighbors, our team was better. So.
Mrs. Lee, I think you work miracles with pennies, and I'd really love, in conjunction with prior to budgeting, to see what your vision of a gifted and talented program would look like. If money was no object, I'd love to know. Well, I'm not offering you the money. I'm saying I'd love to hear what a program would look like. I hear what you do, and it's so impressive to me. I would love to know what you think you could accomplish if you could expand the program with not the budgetary constraints that you have right now.
I will be thrilled to come back and give you a large list, a very long list. I'd like to have more opportunities at the elementary level. I would also like to have some foreign language available at the elementary level. I would love to have the students start earlier with foreign language, even if it was just, you know, an 8-week introduction to a language. A couple of years ago, I looked into getting Rosetta Stone at the elementary level, which I thought would have been great, but it's expensive. You know, there's a wonderful opportunity that's quite expensive. It's thousands of dollars. I know that there are other things like Odyssey of the Mind. You know, there are lots of other things that we can do with our students, but, you know, they're pricey. So if money were no object, I can certainly put together a very large list, which I will bring you before the budget gets decided.
And just a comment, I've done a little bit of research involving strings programs and their connection to gifted and talented and learning, and I know it's very expensive, but I'm wondering if there isn't some way to combine that somehow. That I know South Windsor has a very impactful strings program, but the reward is in academics as well. So if I don't know if that's your spot or if it's our music spot, but I'd love to hear more about strings and that connection as well.
I've actually talked about this both with Mr. Davis and Mrs. Cook.
Okay.
I know that Mr. Davis had many years ago a dream of having a strings program here, and we've gone back and forth about that discussion, and that would be amazing because there is such a deep connection between music and the arts and math, and I mean there's just such a connection and intelligence when you offer students artistic opportunities. So,
and there is no, certainly no promise to funding, particularly in these difficult times, but I think it's worth hearing, not just for board members, but for the public and all, that investments in that kind of instruction has far-reaching benefits.
I agree. I think sometimes we suffer a little bit from lack of advertising ourselves. When I read what other towns are doing for their gifted students, most of the time I say, we do that. Oh, we do that too. Oh, we do that. Yet they advertise it so well, and sometimes I'm not sure that everyone knows the amazing things that we do. So I try to publicize it as much as possible.
Would it require, I know Mrs. Lee comes to us annually, but would it require some kind of a request from the board to ask her to come prior to budgeting, and then again in the spring when she gives us a synopsis of what's going on, but maybe just to hear what, like I asked, what could, if the sky's the limit, what could a gifted program, expanded gifted program look like in learning? Is that appropriate to simply ask, or does it need to be on the record in a motion, or how do you do
I
that?
don't think, I mean, I have it down and I'm gonna save it for the fall and,
Okay.
yeah, I'll definitely.
I'd be thrilled.
I'll get ready. I just have one question. The cross-curricular units, is that for all students or is that just for the gifted and talented students?
It's for all
That's
students.
what I thought.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's for all students.
That's wonderful. Mr. Cleveland, sorry.
Mrs. Lee, I'd love to thank you for all your efforts. I know the Kalina family is very grateful for your efforts.
Thank you.
And I guess what was in the previous presentation about the Maple Street Community School, the efforts of force multiplying and stuff, have you ever explored the possibility of doing a similar sort of program, reaching out to either businesses or other community groups that could potentially give you the resources and help in both personnel and dollars that would truly make your program bloom?
I've actually thought about that. I haven't done a lot of resource looking in other places. I've applied for some grants, but I'll tell you of something that I ran into this year. We, in the fall, in August, signed up with the Scripps National Spelling Bee. We were hoping to send a student to the National Spelling Bee. We found out at the end of October, actually at the end of November, that the Connecticut sponsor, which was the New Haven Register, pulled out and decided they were no longer going to sponsor a Connecticut team at all, which meant that we were without a sponsor, which meant that we, unless we could spend $3,500 to self-sponsor at the middle school, we were not going to send a student to the Scripps Spelling Bee. So I started contacting businesses in the area to find a sponsor. I did speak with someone at Conica Minolta, but unfortunately the time constraints were so tight, a sponsor would have had to only, sign up within like a 2 or 3 week period that we couldn't get a sponsor. So one of my goals this year is to actually start working on that. I'd like to have a sponsor so that our spelling bee winner can go to the National Spelling Bee. When I did some research about schools in Connecticut that have those kinds of resources, the 3 schools that are sending students to the National Spelling Bee are private schools, sort of near the New York area, and the $3,500 self-sponsorship is probably nothing for them because their tuition is, $30,000 a year starting in kindergarten. So I think we're not going to be able to do some of these things without some help from the community, and you're right. I haven't spent a lot of time doing it, but more and more I'm realizing that there are resources out there that I haven't tapped yet. So it's a wonderful suggestion.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. I actually think that your enthusiasm is what makes the program work so well. So thank you very much for all your efforts. And
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me, and I'll come back again soon.
Now we'll move on to item 2.0, consent agenda. Mr. Holt,
Motion to move the consent agenda as presented.
is there a second? Mr. Flanagan?
I was actually.
You can second.
You could second and then do that. How's that?
Fair enough.
Okay, what would you like to pull?
Let's see, what else was
A?
Yes.
Okay, anyone want to pull anything else? Mrs. Russell? B. Anything else? Mr. Wood?
I'll pull A unless Mark's caught what I saw.
Well,
Ours.
A's already been pulled.
Okay.
Anything else? Okay, so we will vote on C and D. All those in favor of approving C and D on the consent agenda? It's unanimous. Okay, Mr. Polino on A.
Yeah, my name was mentioned twice in being present, so I think I should get double the votes for it.
Were you present twice tonight?
No.
Okay. Is there anything else, Mr. Linton, that you saw?
Good.
Okay. All right, anyone make a motion to approve item A on 2.1A?
Motion to approve as amended.
Mr. Hool, is there a second? Mr. Kalina? All those in favor? It's unanimous. Okay. Now for item B, Mrs. Russell.
With the finance committee, I was present at that meeting.
I'm sorry, what you
I'm sorry. With the finance committee, I was present at that meeting.
I can vouch for that.
What, yes, I think, yeah, what page is that on?
I don't know.
8, okay. So we'll add Mrs. Russell to that. Anyone else have anything on B? Okay, let's vote on B and then we'll go back to A. All those in favor of approving, oh wait, we need a motion to approve B. Mr. Kalina, is there a second? Mrs. Russell? All those in favor? It's unanimous. Okay, now Dr. Conway has a comment on A. What's-
On page 1, I realize Mr. Kalina was there twice, but Mr. Linton was not there at all and is not listed as absent, so should the second Mr. Kalina really be Mr. Linton, would be my
Were you there at that meeting?
So I was.
thank you.
Okay. You didn't even notice you were missing, sorry.
I'm here.
Okay, well, now we'll have to go back. Mr. Hull, you made the motion.
Make the motion that we amend as suggested.
Okay, Mr. Second, okay, all those in favor? Okay, unanimous. I think we got through the consent agenda now. That's okay. Now we'll move on to the Secretary's report. Opportunity for the Board of Ed to add or delete agenda items. Anyone want to add or delete an agenda item? No? All right, Rockville High student representatives are not here, so we have no report from them. Community forum, opportunity for comments on agenda items, potential future agenda items, or general information provided to the board from citizens and community organizations. Is there anyone who wishes to address the board this evening?
Well, I'll fix it.
When you're here.
Which, and Lori Bajoric, 60 Patricia Drive, and I think the only thing I'll mention is make sure the board members are aware, and I'm sure Dr. Conway has probably told you, but parents are heatedly discussing currently the Rockville High School the teacher. There's a lot of talk on social media right now with, why is a tenured teacher currently here when we're about to let a whole bunch of teachers go. And obviously the incident at Lake Street today, apparently Channel 3 did report on it this evening, so we will have plenty of media around, I'm sure. I think that's it this week.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Lauren?
I have no idea what Mrs. Bajoric is talking about. Can we get
In regards to,
Lake Street School?
Dr. Conway sent an email today.
We sent an email late this afternoon. There was a student who was approached by a male on his way home from Lake Street School, and the student is safe, unharmed, and was able to get away. The man tried to detain the student, and so the police are involved. All 5 principals are sending out robocalls or have already done so this evening. All 5 elementary schools are placing additional staff before and after at the perimeters of all the schools to watch students safely into adult hands, and the police are involved in the investigation.
Mrs. Russell?
The walkers.
The walkers, that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or does anyone else wish to address the board? All right, thank you very much, Lori. We'll move on to item 5.0, 5.1, teacher termination of personnel. Dr. Conway.
Thank you, and unfortunately, due to the loss of a position to another teacher or the elimination of a position, 3 of our tenured teachers have lost their positions, and because they are tenured, it's the formal way of doing this is to terminate contracts. So I know that sounds harsh. All of these people had been notified actually in early April as the time approached, and were notified again prior to this meeting with at least a 10-day notice that if they wished to have a hearing before the Board of Education, they were to notify. Not one of them did. They've had individual meetings with me and with their principals multiple times. So they know, they're not happy at all, of course, but they know this is what needs to happen. So I would ask that the board terminate those contracts effective July 1.
Could you tell us what they teach and where they teach?
Certainly. Mrs. Andrews Russell is, or Dr. Andrews Russell, sorry, is a physical education teacher at the high school. Ms. Palmeter is a social studies, correct. Social studies teacher at BCMS, and Ms. Fries teaches family and consumer science at BCMS.
Does anyone make a motion? Mrs. Wright?
This is what happens after the dust has all settled, everybody's done everything, and there's nothing left to be done. That's not the answer.
I'm sorry, yes, that's correct. There are people with multiple certifications. There may be people with less, for family and consumer science, that's the lowest person. We have experienced people, and that's 7 years, I think. For the social studies position, there are people with multiple certifications. And so if you only have one certification, there are people, for instance, and maybe not in this case, but there would be a middle school teacher who would also have K-8 elementary certification. And if we have an opening, I could move that person to that position. And so we've done many, many dominoes. Some of them are 5 and 6 people long. People are teaching things they're not very excited about, but will get excited about before the fall. And but they do have jobs. So yes, this is where the dust settles. It's unfortunate. With the 24 teacher positions that were eliminated, there were 11 non-tenured teachers who lost their jobs and 3 tenures, so a total of 14 out of the 24 who lost their jobs.
Mr. Holt?
Make the motion that the Bergen Board of Education terminate the contracts of the following teachers effective July 1, 2015. Sue Andrews Russell, Catherine Palmeter, and Virginia Fries.
Is there a second? Mr. Kalina? Any questions, comments, or discussion? All those in favor? Could abstain.
Oh, my son is there.
You're gonna abstain? Yes, good move. Okay, the motion carries, unfortunately. Now we'll move on to item 6.0, curriculum. 6.1, administrator evaluation scoring chart.
As opposed to several years ago, or many years ago, we used to put our teacher evaluation plan into the state for approval, send it in probably every 10 years. About 2 years ago, it has become now an annual thing. And so the first year we did SEED, which was the state model. We then last year, if you recall, revamped the teacher evaluation plan so that that was different, and we're using that this year very successfully. We asked the board last fall to approve the SEED model again for the administrators. The biggest problem that the board had with it was that it was a round-up model. We did come back to the board with a model that rounded up in terms of student achievement, and rounded down rather in terms of student achievement. Student achievement would trump, in other words, practice. So you could do all the wonderful things you want, but if you didn't increase student achievement, you would not make the grade. So we've been working all year, as we said we would, and we as the paper we, I suppose, we means Mr. Burt, on another model that, so this is just the scoring rubric. This doesn't tell you how many times we're in the classroom, etc. And so he is sharing this model with you, how to determine the summative ratings for teachers. We still are required in the end to provide a number, 1, 2, 3, or 4. What you have before you is a little bit different from last year. So I'll turn this over to Mr. Burt.
Thank thank you, Dr. Conway, for that history lesson as well. Just one more note, in the past, the process was that we would bring both evaluation plans to the board for approval, then submit to the state. Last year, the state revised that. We now have to submit to the state, get feedback, and make any revisions they request before we present it to you. We did hand in the plan before May 1st, and we're hopeful that we'll receive some feedback in the next couple weeks. They anticipate we should hear in the early weeks of June, but you know, we'll see what happens with that. And once we do get that feedback and we're able to make revisions, then we'll bring the final versions to the board for approval, hopefully before the summer recess. So that's just in terms of the time frame. Also, we did develop this, not just the royal we. It was with Ms. Vijasekar and Mr. Mago as part of the Vernon Administrative Association. Just try to make sure that we're working with the union in a way that would enable us to come up with a process that was equitable for everyone involved. Still raise standards and accountability, but also allow for a growth model similar to our model for the teachers. Again, it didn't present you the whole plan. Primarily, the area of focus from last year's discussion was on the rating. So that's the only thing that we brought forward at this point. When we do bring the entire plan, once we get feedback from the state, then you'll have an opportunity to explore that and ask any questions on that. So just to review on that second page there, you saw the rubric from our current model. This is based on the state model, and just to give you some background, you notice on the side it says locally determined measures of academic learning, and then the top is state measures of academic learning. Actually, that's the wrong rubric. On the side, I have the wrong one. You can see on the sides overall student outcome rating, and on the top overall leadership practice rating. There's a number of these rubrics in the plan. That's why there's confusing, because they all do the same thing to end up with this final goal. What you don't see in there, that overall student outcome rating, is that there's a formula behind that gives you weighting, gives you points, and then gives you a system of how to determine whether it's a 4, 3, 2, or 1. Same thing for that top rating of overall leadership practice rating. There's a large formula in there that rates different sections, weights it, and then you end up with this final 4, 3, 2, 1, which brings us to this matrix, and it basically gives you a decision. And again, it was a round up model. I won't go into lengthy history, but originally it was a round down, and it's round up, and then we at Vernon were able to come up with this hybrid model that weights the y-axis, if you will, more than the x-axis. So that's what we had last year, and again, it was just we didn't have the time to really spend to develop something better. So through discussions and through some thinking and some past practice, we determined another way. It's basically a standards base. And it seems a bit confusing, but if you just think of everyone starts at proficient. So if you can see, you write down that model, proficient rated is 0. So everyone starts out with 22 of possible 33 points. And if you get 22 points at the end of this, you're rated proficient. But you can also see down at the bottom there's a range. 19 to 27 points rates you proficient. If you're in the 28 to 33 range, you're exemplary. 10 to 18 developing, and so on. Now, why the different ratings? Well, you can see in the paragraph under the chart, it is to give us some weighting for those areas that we feel as a district are more important than other areas. Now, this is open for debate and discussion, but this is just the starting point. I'm sure we'll get feedback from the state on this, and we'll get more feedback from our administrative union, and we can work with this. What you notice is the first 4 there, 5, that's based on the Connecticut Common Core of Leading, or the Connecticut School Leadership rubric. It's a very lengthy rubric in each one of these areas. For instance, the performance expectation number 1, vision, mission, and goals. There's an entire rubric rated from 1 through 4 for many different indicators, same thing for 2, 3, 4, etc. So when we look at those and we look at what they're actually judging in that rubric, as we had this discussion, we decided really that it's the teaching and learning piece, and it's not the administrators teaching and learning, but it's their guidance, their instructional leadership that was really heavily weighted. Again, you can see it can be +3 points, -3 points, or -6 points. The other area is student learning objectives. This is really where their school's mission is to improve the academic achievement of their students. So we're really heavily weighted towards improving the lives of our students, and it's the mission and goal of the administrator in those buildings to move the students forward and to help their teachers learn and become instructional leaders themselves, and to work on collaborative movements. There's other pieces in here. I won't go into great detail. We can provide you with a rubric if you like. But again, it's a weighting system. It's a standards-based, it's a performance-based rubric. You could be rated highly in one area but lower in another area. And instead of doing a complicated algebraic formula to end up with this weighting system that they had in the decision matrix, essentially it just adds up. So you start with 22, and if you had -3 points, then you end up with 19 points. You can see that in the example below, the circle that I believe is on the second page in your packet. You can see that in this case, if it were the end of year rating, for the first area, you're proficient in the area, so it's 0 points. And the teaching and learning, again, it's heavily weighted. It's -3 points, then the next two areas is 0, -1, 0, 0. The formula is right underneath, the addition's underneath. And all those added up together are -4. You take your base of 22, which everyone starts at, again. You subtract 4, 18, you're now in the developing area. So the same thing can happen the other way. Let's say you had 2 or 3 points in the upper hand. You can be weighted at 25 points, or you can be weighted at 28 points, and then you'd be rated exemplary. So there's still a lot of areas in here. There's still a lot of room for growth. There's still a lot of work that can be done with the evaluator and the administrator. And the nice thing about this particular matrix is right now we are using the Connecticut Common Core of Leading, which has the 6 standards. There's other rubrics out there that are currently being discussed, and we don't know which one the state will land with. One of them has only 4 indicators instead of the 6 that you see in this particular model. The adaptability of the system, we can revisit it and we can look at the new system with only 4 indicators and weight them again. Go back, reset, and reweight. So we don't have to redo our entire plan. We can adapt to whatever the state brings forward, or if there's an alternate rubric that we choose to use that's coming up from a couple different consortiums or developing things that may be more interesting than what the state comes up with. So it's adaptable. It does, again, emphasize what we believe is important as a district in terms of the standards, and it gets us to a clear rating as opposed to a round up, round down. One last note is that this is up for discussion. We're going to live with this for a year. Again, we have to submit it every year, so we'll continue to work through this and see how it works. And then if necessary, make any revisions and present those to the state and to the board at about the same time next year. So I'm available for any questions you might have.
Mr. Polino.
Okay, maybe you could explain to me, but for the sake of simplicity, and maybe it loses some of the subtlety along the way, instead of starting out with a base of 22, start off with a base of 0 and add less points for lower, for below standard, developing, proficient, and then with the most points added to get to when you get to the exemplary. So you're not adding and subtracting, you're just adding values until you come up with your final number.
I agree. There's multiple ways that we can do this. This is a way that teachers have used in different disciplines. It's a rating scale. But the emphasis there is that you're starting out at proficient. So it's actually a benefit to the administrator to say, yes, we believe that you're starting out proficient, and then you're looking at each individual area to determine, where you would sit in those specific indicators.
I was just trying to say that, you could still come up with your same result, just, in a somewhat simpler format. So.
Absolutely. There's multiple ways we could do this. We struggled through a number of them.
Mrs. Arndt.
I like the weighted standard portion. I get that, and I think that to me addresses what the board was trying to achieve, so I appreciate that. I wonder if other districts are struggling with this, Mr. Burt, or if we're making a bigger deal out of it than it. Not that the evaluation is not a big deal, but how we're actually recording and arriving at a grading for these administrators. Are we alone in this, or is it across the state?
Well, I'll jump in here through the chair. Having shown our teacher evaluation plan at a state convention and with colleagues around the state, they appreciate that we've moved away from the matrix. We're not the only ones that have done that. There's other districts that are developing their own system for scoring, moving away from the roundup matrix. So I don't know if there's other boards struggling with this. Primarily it's central office staff, from my knowledge. I don't know, Dr. Conway, if you've heard something similar from other colleagues. Yes, there are a lot of districts that are looking to move away from the seed. The nice thing about the seed is that it's easy. You just put your name on it, you submit it to the state, and you pretty much get approval right away. So there's a convenience factor there. We feel that it doesn't really represent our teachers and our administrators. There's feedback from the teachers as well has been that it's good to see clear accountability, clear formulas. I'm hopeful that we see the same thing from this, even though it's, you're starting out with a proficient, that it's fairly simple. You add or subtract, and you end up with a final rating. And again, we can adapt it. We can work with it over time. We can change the weighting lists. We feel that another category is more important as we move through this. It's easily adjusted relatively quickly.
Appreciate the adaptability. Again, I appreciate the weighted standards. That makes a difference. And through all its convolution, I appreciate that you're willing to just keep going back and trying it again and again. I'll be interested to know how this flies. And you think that will be June sometime?
We are also greatly interested,
Okay.
considering it was a 4-month process with the state last year for the teacher evaluation. We could be looking at 4 months again, because it is a little different.
Sorry.
Is the administrators union on board with this also?
Again, they are, pending state approval. They're looking at that, and also with the acceptance that we're going to review this as we live with it. So as long as we keep saying that it's not set in stone, we're going to see how it works and then make revisions as necessary. From what I understand, the feedback has been positive.
Does anybody else have any questions? Thank you very much. And thank you
Thank you.
for all the work that went into this on everybody's part. Now we'll move on to item 6.2, Summer Academy Overview and Summer School Fees. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Rocket and Mr. Galley are coming to the microphone at this point. You have in your packet a suggestion for increasing the fees for summer school. We haven't done that in a while. And you also have a copy of the brochure that went home to parents that do show a change in fees. So certainly, if the board does not approve the elementary change, then we would not charge that much to parents, but they are on notice that that was what we were looking for, an increase in elementary. So elementary just went up by $5 in theirs. So I will turn this over to Mr. Rocket, and Mr. Rocket also did provide you with a handout this evening. Mr. Rocket.
Thank you, Dr. Conway. So we're here pursuant to your board policy 6174, which has two real pertinent sections for us. One is that we run the summer school on a self-sustaining basis, and that we come to you to establish the non-resident fees. I'll tell you that the basic structure of our summer school this year is very, very similar to last year, which we considered very successful in a number of ways. But like all operations, you look at problems and try and fix and improve little ones. So we have a couple of modifications, but the basic structure is the same, one of blended learning, where there's an online component and a component where students are required to come in at certain times for certain reasons. And we term those seminars. I'll have Lindsay go over the specifics. You can see the fees that we're seeking to increase, the very top box there, from $220 to $285, $110 to $145, and from $60 to $75 for non-residents. So that's what we'll actually be seeking. So I'll let Lindsay go over the specifics for us.
Okay. So as Andy just mentioned, obviously it's a self-funding program. Last summer, the total expense was over $24,000, and our tuition only pulled in $19,600. So $19,625 to be exact. So obviously that wasn't so self-sustaining, so we needed to make some adjustments. The easiest one obviously is to jump right to cost, but we also took some other money-saving opportunities, I guess. So the cost-cutting measures that we were looking at are actually on the back side of the handout you have. We were looking at dropping down, and I've decided to drop down from 5 days a week to 4 days a week for summer school. Again, it's an online blended learning component. So students are required to come in for the seminars, but we found that very few students were there all 5 days during the week, and that we would still be able to provide the appropriate services for our students, the one-to-one attention for students that are struggling and things of that sort, if we did go from 5 days to 4 days. And that would save us $160 per teacher per week. And just so you're aware, we did have, last year we had a counselor helping with registration only, and that cost about $500. We decided this year, Mr. Brewer and I did a lot of those registrations anyway and could probably handle that on our own. So that was one cost-cutting measure, as well as dropping it down from 5 days to 4. We have 1 science teacher, 2 English teachers, 2 history teachers, 2 math teachers, a blended learning coordinator, and a PE teacher. This year, we would like to hire an additional science teacher based on last year's numbers, and we're predicting that this year's numbers will be the same. In the past, we've had 2 science teachers. We just didn't have the interest last year and tried to run it with just 1, and it was very difficult for that teacher to run 3 different science courses and many, many labs. So we would look to, in addition to those dropping down the number of days per week, we are also looking at dropping the number of hours, not significantly, but from 5 3/4 hours per day to 5 1/2 hours per day. That's $280 saved total per week, so a little over $1,000 for the summer that it would save. Putting that money towards hiring that new science teacher. We could also take the money covered from going from 5 days to 4 days would also cover, easily cover that science teacher. The PE, we only had about 5 students last summer, 3 for 1 session and 2 for another session. So we ended up losing money in PE, but wanted to run it because we knew how important it was for those few students. But looking at the numbers this year, we really want to be able to make it a self-sustaining program. So I did, what's also on the back side, I looked at comps in the area and what the different schools are offering. So those are there for you to look at. The closest one to what we offer is Windsor. They use Edgenuity, similar to GradPoint, and they use coordinators only, so teachers but not specific to a subject area. And so we offer a much more specific program, giving more one-to-one instruction with the content there. And their pricing for their non-residents is $300, so ours is still under what they are looking at. So, are there any questions?
Is there a minimum amount of hours that the students need to get when they take a summer school?
We're looking at, this year actually, we're looking at making a mandated attendance for, the school would run this year would be 16 days. So 8 of those days we're looking at as required days, 2 of which are required seminars, including labs that the teachers will be running. But the other days are for check-in points with teachers and one-to-one instruction if students are falling behind. And students will be able, because we wanted the flexibility still, students are able to pick those dates. So they can we still have that flexibility of students being able to hold a job or go on family vacations and things of that sort. But again, this model of blended learning is really not about seat time, it's about competency and showing mastery in a subject area. So, so that's what we're looking at.
Mr. Kling?
So if I'm reading this correctly, it's non-resident fees?
Yes.
Right? So how many non-residents did we have last year?
We had, I believe it was somewhere in the low 40s.
That many?
Yeah, we get a lot of students, and that's courses. I don't know if it's per student. There, many many non-resident students take 2 or even 3 courses.
Okay.
And that's actually where we make the most money, is really with our non-residents.
Okay, now with the increase, how do you think that's going to impact the final numbers this year?
I don't think
at some point you get a cost benefit and a loss.
I don't think it will, and that's why I looked at the comps in the area. We're still, for what we offer, we're still pretty competitive. If you look at Crack's Virtual Learning Academy in South Windsor, it's $510 for 1 course. You know, the Enfield is $260, but it's a traditional classroom, not offering the flexibility that we offer. And East Hartford, 240, again, that's traditional. So for what we offer, I do not think any students from the outside districts would be turned away.
Okay. Now, the other question I have is, it says non-RHS student, but then you also mentioned non-residents. What about agricultural students that come from other towns that are actual high school students in RHS? Where do they fall?
RHS students.
They're the RHS rates, as well
Okay.
as students that are residents that are going to magnet schools are also RHS student rates.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Arndt?
Is there ever any consideration for charging RHS students?
There is a fee for RHS students. It's just not on not necessarily in the board policy to be approved, but there is a fee.
Right, we've increased that
that
from 150 to 175.
175.
And prorated at 25% of that for reduced and 50% of that for free lunch.
Yes.
Is that anywhere in here?
No,
Will you say it again, please?
yes, from 150 to 175. 25% less than that for reduced lunch, 50% less than that for free lunch. Free lunch.
And that drops down to the half credit and quarter credit classes as well.
So you're not looking for approval for that increase?
Your policy doesn't require, your policy
Okay.
requires you to do self-sustaining and seek fee approval for out-of-town residents only, or out-of-town students.
I just was curious that South Windsor and West Hartford make no consideration. It doesn't look like for resident versus non-resident.
No, they didn't specify anything on there, and I contacted, it's a set fee, here's what the cost is. And I know West Hartford also does original credit summer school, and again, it's traditional classroom setting.
Mr. Holm?
You indicated that we had about 40 courses taken by non-residents last year, and what was the high school population, our own students that were taking summer school last year?
About 100, a little under 100.
100 persons?
So we had 157 and a half, I believe, credits attempted last year.
And do we know roughly where we anticipate we'll be this year based on any of the data that we have at this point? Or do
Pretty
we know?
consistent. I mean, it's been pretty consistent all the way through. It will be interesting to see now that we have this approach if we're attracting more students, because last year was our first year using the blended learning approach. So I have heard students talking about it. I have heard students asking, when's the packet coming out? What's it going to be? I've had phone calls from in and out of district families. So they're definitely interested. And we've had some repeat customers from outside districts interested in it as well.
Any other questions? If anyone's interested in the motion, Mrs. Arndt?
Well, I have questions about VCMS. Do we need to address this in one motion? And there isn't anybody here?
Mike is, Mr. Gelada's here.
Oh.
Hello, Michael Gelada, Assistant Principal of VCMS. We're looking to keep the same pricing structure as Rockville High School. The middle school and the high school have always kept the same pricing structure. The past 9 years, we've had an average of 2.4 students out of district, so we don't have a great number of out of district students. The past 2 years, we've had none. A few years before that, we're looking at about 2 a year. Maybe 8, 9 years ago, we had 5 or 6. So we do not have a huge population of out-of-district students coming to VCMS. Last year, our program, we had 20 students taking a total of 34 classes. We also operated in the red, just under $600. So, we're looking at the same pricing structure, increasing a little bit for our students, increasing a little bit more for out-of-district to compensate for that.
Any questions? Mr. Holm? Oh, Mr. Clean.
Getting back to the high school, why do you attribute the fact that we're gaining students from other districts? Is it because of the quality of the instruction, the value of the dollars for the instruction? I mean, is there any sense as to why we get students there, but not at BCMS, or we advertise it better? Or
Yeah, so I think a couple things. One is it's certainly less expensive, and that's a factor for a lot of people. I think our model last year was an interesting model, not the online version, which I think people are coming to realize is a difficult one, because you put entire responsibility on an adolescent, and having some in my own household, I know how risky that could be sometimes. So this is just a really good model, and we're sort of refining that approach to a blended approach. So I think it's a couple of reasons, but to firm that up a little, we thought ourselves we want to do an exit poll to gather various information on the last day of classes for kids, especially our out-of-town kids, for that reason.
Mm-hmm. Now, is this something you want to like advertise, or we just want to keep it, you know, try to generate a little income out of it, but don't expand it, and just, I mean, what's your ultimate goal?
Can I start with that? A couple of things. One of the reasons we get out-of-district students more at the high school is because the schools that they go to don't offer a summer school program. Mm-hmm. So, and we're close and we're less expensive than anything else in that area. And all of the students that were out of district were successful and got the credit last year. So we've got a great track record. I do, as soon as we put the program together for the summer, I reach out to the assistant principals and head of guidance departments in all the other districts, and I email them what we have, give them my contact information, and I speak to them personally just to let them know what we're offering and mention changes in the programming. So I would love to see it expand. I would, I'd love to see more students from the areas that are charging so much actually come to us. And I think this model is a great one. The students, I was just talking with a student tonight at the awards night who was so grateful for the opportunity to do classes in this way, because it's how he works. And it's extremely successful for some of the kids that don't work well in a traditional classroom. So I do think it's a great model. I think we've got more to learn, and I think we're headed in the right direction.
Quick aside on that point, that student completed, or is on track to complete, 14 credits this year. 14. And has asked if they have to go to the senior day on Friday, because they want to stay and make sure they finish up their course.
Thank you.
You had also asked a question about why there may be more students at the high school than the middle school. I think part of it is graduation requirements, credit recovery, versus the philosophy in middle school about promotional criteria. I think other schools looking at, promoting students. I think it's a bit different philosophy than the high school. When they have to earn credits, they fail math, they need that credit to graduate. I think we're looking at a lot different philosophy there between schools. We don't get as many out-of-district students for that reason.
Fair enough, thank you.
Mrs. Russell.
Do we provide bus transportation?
No, we do not. Students are responsible for their own transportation.
If everybody's done.
Every year, Mr. Rocket, I ask you to make me feel good about providing this. I know you have minimums for entry into this kind of credit recovery, but 16 days isn't very much, and I don't mean to be rude, but I'm unimpressed by someone who is gathering 14 credits through this kind of learning. I worry that it's an easy way to get credits when a student can't succeed over the course of the year. So I always worry that, are we really doing the student a service, or are we just making it easy?
Right, so I appreciate your question. I'll ask you to reconsider about that 14 credit student. This is a student who was struggled their first couple of years. The last year started to come around. That student has been cranking since June of last year, taking both a full-time credit here and a couple of extras. So remember, they're doing an 8-credit schedule here in addition to last summer, and then overloading, just as I mentioned. That student has just radically turned around. They did not get into college. That student has said, but now I'm thinking military because they'll pay for college. I think as a bottom line, you couldn't ask for a bottom line better than that for what we can do for someone. And that would not have happened had that student not had this opportunity. Your main question regarding the rigor of it, I don't know that blended learning is the best primary model or sole model for instruction. but is it an outstanding opportunity for a variety of ad hoc things? Credit recovery, certainly. There's no course that I would say is not right for it under certain circumstances. We've had some math kids we're talking about from the middle school when Ms. Lee and Mr. Gelata came down, who we think might do extremely well with some of our Algebra 1 and 2 courses from the 7th grade because of who they are individually. Is it right for everybody? No. Do some people need to process differently and go through the question and answer that occurs in a classroom and do group projects? Probably most need to do that, but not all, and our job is to target properly.
And I will say too, the summer school, I believe at the middle school too, last year was 19 days. And now putting it to 16 days for us, knowing that some of those days are required seminars, which require group work, which require a little bit of lecture and discussion. In English, they write papers, read plays, act out plays. They're still doing that, and remembering that it's credit recovery. So assuming that some students didn't make the best decisions and maybe didn't make the best grade as a result, but now they have the ability to demonstrate competency in that area. And they work hard. They work very hard. And the student we were talking about, all of those credits weren't necessarily online, I don't believe, so he's having a full regular set of classes plus, which, you know, the 8 credits, plus, 6 credits online for recovery for mistakes and poor decisions and bad planning for his first couple of years.
Is there a minimum to be admitted into one of the summer courses?
No, we don't have a grade minimum because we often find that circumstances can lead to really inequities when that happens. An example might be a student who's been there for a good part of the semester or year, has failed a couple finals, and then just packs it in with respect to tests and assessments. So we don't know that that really serves our purpose or the student's purpose. If a student really hasn't learned that, and a low grade is because they haven't learned anything, if they have a 15 or a 20, they're not going to succeed on grad point either.
And to address your question at the middle school, is 19 hours the same as taking science for full year? The answer is no. But we meet within the next week, we meet with all the teachers, administrators, we make, they make recommendations, administrators consider that, we make decisions based on what's best for the student. So should the student be retained or should we recommend summer school? So this is really to get the student, over that hump. So if they had a 61 and they're close, they may just need to refine some of those skills. Obviously, if someone did no work all year, we wouldn't recommend them for summer school, to make that count for a full year course. So it's really to get those students, over the hump that are somewhat close.
Didn't it used to be that if they failed a course but below 60, then they weren't eligible for summer school? Is that not the case anymore?
Right. Not now. We go on a case-by-case basis now.
We did have students just last summer that had those low scores, and we advised against signing up for summer school because we said, I don't think you have the basic knowledge for this. And some of those kids proved us wrong, but I'm thinking of one student in particular who was not successful, and that student had to retake the course this year, and that was a conversation, again, on an individual basis that we had with the guidance counselor of that student. This was not a successful program for that student, and so they need to repeat the entire course. So.
How many of your students aren't successful in summer school then?
I presented those numbers. I don't have them in front of me. I could get that. Not very many. Every student that was, like I said, every student that was out of district, no matter how many courses they took, they completed all of those courses. Our in-district students, I want to say, I don't know, 9 or 10 of them that didn't complete them. Those were the ones that we had conversations with the counselors about what's the next step for this student. This didn't work, so now what?
So if the student recovers, I'm sorry.
No, and to sort of supplement that, I remember the whole concept is to expand learning opportunity for kids. And so at the end of summer school, some kids have signed up because mom and dad made them sign up, and they might have done 10% of the course. They're done, they take it again in September. But there's some kids, 70% complete, and what we go to those kids and say, even though the summer school period is over, and of course we don't tell them this at the start of summer school, but we'll go to them at the end and say, you're nearly there, right? If you keep working, we'll keep it open for you, and as long as you continue to make progress, you might be able to finish it. And we'll get a couple dribble in through the remainder of the summer and into the fall even.
So if a student shows competency in the summer program, are they ready to take the next math, the next English, the next science, and they're successful? The summer school completes what they need for the next step?
Yes, we think so. I mean, if you're interested, we can maybe sign you up for one of our Algebra 1 courses and hack through that. I mean, you do have to do the work, you do have to pay attention and learn. We supplement that with our seminars to try and give some of that face-to-face stuff. And again, I'm not suggesting it's going to take over the world. It's really to expand learning opportunities for kids. It helps.
At the middle school, all 34 classes were passed last year. We get very few students come back year after year. It's only my second year. This will be my second year running the program. But from what I've seen, we get some students back a second year in a row. But after spending their time there in the summer, it's an incentive to work harder the next year. Throughout the year. So, from what I've seen from what Mr. Harrison has said, very few students come back a second time for summer school.
Do you do the blended learning courses at VCMS also?
We do not for summer school.
Mr. Holt.
I'd like to make the motion that the board approve the fee increase for the 2015 summer school program to be held at Vernon Middle School and Rockville High School as presented.
I second that.
Any further discussion, comments, concerns, Mrs. R?
Just like to ask if the, I hope I'm not putting anybody on the spot, is this reviewed because it's supposed to be self-sustaining by the business office, or, with the projected numbers and all, or, I know that the loss was not great, not at all. I know that's not to be too concerned about, but I'm just wondering if there's additional input or review.
Every year we look at the numbers. We don't know them until summer school is almost over, or at least has started. And we anticipate or have anticipated some sort of subsidy for summer school in the past few years. There were a couple of years, more than a couple, several years ago, we had many more students and they were self-sustaining. So I think it's that we have fewer students now, and that's one of the reasons for the increase. But we monitor it, and we do put money in the budget for the elementary program, but not for the middle and the high school. So we just watch it closely, and as it comes in, we work with Mr. Harrison, or the principal, and Mr. Rocket.
May I also say, with respect to that loss, a lot of that was designed, really. We knew we had that money in our student activities account under our summer school account, and it was part of our planned program change, really. We hired the blended learning coordinator last year, which was a new, right off the top expenditure for last year.
Yes.
And your information is that the decrease in the number of days, the decrease in the number of hours, eliminating those two positions will cover the cost of the additional science teacher. That's your plan.
Well, when you take into account all the cost cuts, the elimination from 5 to 4,
Right.
15 minutes a day, and tuition increases, using the same numbers as we got this year, we believe it'll be self-sustaining.
Okay.
Okay, any other further questions, comments? Okay, we have a motion on the floor to approve the new fees. I'm so sorry.
I'm sorry. Did we mention how many elementary students is in this program?
We got that report in the fall. But it's not here because we don't have to approve any fees for that right now.
I can get those numbers for you again.
Thank you.
All right, the motion on the floor is to approve the fee increase for our out-of-district summer school. All those in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, general business, item 7.1, 2015-16 Alliance District Grant Budget. Mr. Testa.
Thank you. I'm just going to highlight the changes. You've had, I left the whole thing rather than creating a spreadsheet for you. I thought, even though there's more lines and more numbers and more words, I thought that it would be more clear to see that. So on the, I'm sorry, pages. On the second page, under the talent priorities, there are two increases to the budget, two changes. I'll just call them changes at this point. One is in the very first line of the budget, and that is an additional teacher coach. This year, we did not fill that role. We had Jen Fries-Miller, who was funded as a resident principal through the state of Connecticut, Lead Connecticut, and the IDEA, not the IDEA grant, it was the Title I grant. Title I grant, and so we would return that funding there if she does not find a job as a principal. The second change is 1.4, so it's last line in the third box, and that would be the Summer Leadership Academy for department heads. We're trying to move our teachers into create teacher leader positions and ensure that they are well trained for that. On the fifth page, so this is under academic priorities. So on the second page of academic priorities, the fifth box down is purchasing the Do the Math Now kits for intervention. And that is, we have two interventionists, or we will have two interventionists. We had an empty position for the entire year this year, so we're hoping to fill that next year. That's one of the dominoes that we were able to fill. So that is materials for our interventionists to work with students. Under culture and climate priorities, there are two additions, and they are in the first area, personnel services salaries. The second line down is the lead teacher at Maple Street School. This would be last year we started calling it a dean of students. It would be a teacher position, not an administrator position. Someone, I like the lead teacher name better, however, because it would be someone who not only assisted with students, but also would be assisting with professional learning with teachers and working hand in hand with Ms. Trantolo. The fourth box there, one more additional psychologist. That was something the board did during budget season. That was psychologist for Skinner Road School. Right now our psychologist shares two schools, Northeast and Skinner Road, and that would allow us to have a full-time person at both schools, at each school, excuse me. Under operations priorities, there are a number of changes. First, under personnel services, in the first box, the grant writer position, that was another budget move that we are going to fund some of that position through the Alliance grant, and the rest of it will be added on to any grant that is written as an administrative cost. The third line down is the science safety leader. That was proposed. It's a stipend position. We have not yet negotiated with the union for that. But with the number of chemicals and science labs we have, it would behoove us certainly to have someone in charge of safety in all of our buildings. On the right-hand side of operations priorities, you can see towards the middle of the page, these are, some of these we got this year as well, but I'll highlight all of them. Many of these items are in the 5-year replacement plan that the board approved and that we presented to the town council last January. So you can see there are smart boards, LCD projectors for the middle and high school, the replacement of 70 teacher laptops, 60 student desktops, and then the labs at high school and elementary. So that is a significant amount of money, much more than we had in there this year for that. So those are the changes as last year, and in a similar vein to the teacher evaluation and the administrator evaluation plan. We had to submit this. We were asked not to have the board approve it until the state comes back and gives us all our revisions. They did give us one set of revisions, so if you got the first draft, this one does look a little bit different. Not in the budget, but in the narratives. Mr. Testa has been working on this as a project for his superintendent certificate. And so we're very, very grateful for all the work that he has done on this, the budget and the narratives and the revisions to this. So we are hoping, we have made those revisions, we have resubmitted the plan, and we're very hopeful that that will be it for the state, that they're just going to give us back one. They did say it wouldn't be out until August, and so it will be the August board meeting that the board would approve it, but we want to keep you in the loop. And our other concern is the budget. If we are hiring positions, we need permission to hire those positions. And we can't wait until August to do that. So that would be why we bring it forward to you this evening to approve the budget.
Do you have any questions? I have a few. I'm sorry. We have the assistant principal at Center Road, which is a .5 position, but it looks to me like his benefits are being 100% paid out of Alliance. Is that correct? And are you allowed to do that? Because he's only a .5 FTE, you only have to do .5 of his benefits? We actually can, and the way that happened was the first year we only had the .5 out of the Alliance, and he became a .5 physical education teacher, and so we had to take 100, we didn't have that funding, so we had to take 100% of the benefits out of the Alliance grant, and has just remained there. Okay, and same thing with the grant writer. It looks like that those benefits are 100%, but you were saying it was only going to be. Well, her salary is only, I think, $24,000 out of that, and she makes a little bit more. Right, but same thing for benefits. Look like it's 100%. Right. Okay. Yeah. Right. So as long as that's okay, I didn't know. Okay. Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions? No? All right. Are we anticipating any more funds from the Alliance District for this year? We are not. We're not. Okay. Because this is exactly what we got this year, correct? Correct. Same amount. All right. There's a recommended motion. Anyone? Mr. Kalina?
I make a motion that the Vernon Board of Education approve the 2015-2016 Alliance District grant budget as presented.
There's a second. Mr. Linton?
I'll second that.
Questions, comments, concerns? Okay, all those in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, item 7.2, Board of Education Ad Hoc Athletic Committee. Thank you, Mr. Testa, for all your work on this. Mr. Linton.
Thank you. The biggest update or movement that we have, which will take place, we're going to be moving from the Ad Hoc Athletic Committee over to the Facilities Committee, which will be taking place on June 3rd, is we'll be discussing vendors for the study of the southern fields at Rockville High School, which is the varsity baseball, varsity softball, varsity soccer fields. We're going to start getting prices to hopefully start renovating those fields someday. I don't want to say soon, I don't want to say tomorrow, I don't want to say 10 years from now, but someday. And that's really going to hinge on what the cost will be and then ultimately funding. So that's the biggest news that we have, and open it up to any questions that anybody may have tonight.
So someday means that it all depends on, like you said, the cost of it. And once you find out the cost of it, and maybe it's too big for the budget this year, what are we gonna do? Do you have any suggestions?
Well, we discussed fundraising, bonding, and then the other thing that came up was the board's capital non-recurring account. So there's 3 avenues of potential funding, and also it's all going to hinge on cost.
But it will get done,
If it's up to me, yes.
one way or the
But it's
other.
ultimately up
I
to the board.
understand what you're saying.
When that gets presented, once we get prices, I couldn't even venture to guess what that cost would be right now.
I understand, but we do have some sort of strategy to get this
Yes.
done.
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
And to be fair, this is like 30 years in the making. It's just, and I've repeated this over and over again, this just didn't happen.
I know.
And ultimately, hopefully we don't have this happen again, so the board 10 years, 20 years, 30 years down the road doesn't have to go through the same issue.
Thank you. As long as there's some strategy.
Yes,
Okay.
there's a plan.
Okay.
Does anybody else have any questions, Mr. Lynn? Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Reports from Board of Ed liaisons regarding attendance at organizations and committee meetings. Does anybody have anything to report? No. I was at the School Wellness Council meeting, and we are now working on revising our policy. We went through the whole policy and made some changes, and that will be brought before the policy committee and then brought before the full board for approval. That's all I have. Next is update on the executive search process. We had our first workshop with the search consultant last week. When we were given, she had put together the candidate profile based on all the information from the focus groups and the surveys. And we will use that document to help determine if the candidates meet the desired characteristics outlined in the profile. We are in the process of developing questions to be asked at the first round of interviews, and we are reviewing the applications at this point in time. The second workshop is tomorrow night, where we will finalize our interview questions, and the candidates will be chosen for the first round of interviews, which are on June 1st and June 2nd. So, did I leave anything out? All right, that's where we are in that process right now. Okay, now to review and update the Board of Education calendar. Does anybody have anything for the calendar?
If I may, Mrs. Fisher, we have a special Board of Education meeting that we'd like to schedule for Thursday at 5:30. We've now heard from 4 board members who can make it, which is not a quorum. So the board does have the opportunity to indicate that this will be a 3 or 4 member panel if you wish. So we have heard from Mrs. Fisher, Mrs. Linton, Mr. Linton, excuse me, Mrs. Russell, and Ms. Arnn. So we now have 4 people. I don't anticipate we're going to get a 5th, so that would be an adjustment that the board would need to make, is to name. You're allowed to name a 3-member panel. I'm sure it's not a problem with a 4-member panel either. But
Do we need a motion for that?
so I would do that because that has not been your practice.
Okay. Then we'll make a motion that we have a 4-member panel for this special meeting on Thursday, the 28th at 5:30. Mrs. Arnn?
Move to establish a 4-member panel to deal with the meeting on the 28th.
Is there a second? Mr. Linton? Any questions? Mr. Kleena?
First of all, I wish I could attend, but I can't. But beyond that, what if one of the 4 members drops out for any purpose? What happens
So
then?
maybe we could make the motion a minimum of 3, and if 4 comments, okay?
You never know.
That's right.
That's true. Are you okay with amending your motion?
Can the motion be 3 or 4-member panel then?
Okay, any other questions or concerns? Okay, Mr. Linton?
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you. All right, all those in favor? It's unanimous.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else for the calendar? Opportunity for questions from the press. Nobody's here. One last motion.
Move
To adjourn, all right, second. Mr. Kalina? All those in favor? Unanimous.
Thank you very much.